Hi, I'm Jeremiah. Welcome to Up at Night. This podcast is all about learning from thought leaders, academics, and professionals based on one fundamental question. What keeps you up at night? Welcome to Up at Night. I'm so excited today to have Mario Lemieux joining me today. Mario is someone I've known for a very long time. He's one of the person I respect the most when it comes to marketing, when it comes to entrepreneurship. And he's had many positions. Today he's in charge of business development. He's at the lead of one of the most amazing agency that I know, DAC Group. So Mario, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
So Mario, we've met many years ago when in a very funny circumstantial manner where I was still working at the Yellow Pages Group. And if I'm correct, at that moment, DAC was also having a lot of clients that were using your services to managing some of these services. The first question I have for you is how over these years you've seen this industry evolve and your role evolve quite a lot. So what brought you there?
All right, so that's quite a story because I've been at the agency now over 30 years. What actually brought me, I was a client. So I started my career with the car rental company called Hertz. And Hertz was extremely dependent way back on the Yellow Pages. That was the source of leads, number one source of leads. And DAC was our agency for Yellow Pages. I was head of marketing for Canada and met the partners at the agency. And we were living in Toronto then, wanted to start a family in Montreal. So moved to Montreal and left my job at Hertz because the headquarters were in Toronto and approached my contacts. And one of them was the founder of DAC. And one thing led to the other. So I entered the agency in an account role. And since then, of course, we've seen this whole industry pretty much disappear. Yellow Pages over time got replaced by search engines, which are still in transition today. But with that, DAC was able to morph from what used to be exclusively directory advertising. So DAC was formed to service national clients in the Canadian landscape on the directory scene. And had a fairly large share of that. But 20 years ago, we could see that the industry was going to morph and change. In fact, when I met you, I think you'd just moved from Yellow Pages to Mediative, which was their initiative for web, if I'm not mistaken. And so over 20 years ago, DAC started this transformation. And today we're full funnel media agency that is now also international in scope. That's grown significantly, that is forced to recognize. So to answer your question, the way people search has changed dramatically over time. They're still trying to do the same thing, which is, we're trying to put buyers and sellers together at the most important time with the best possible option. So it's kind of an ongoing journey. And of course, today Google has the lion's share of this. We could see the space evolving with chat GPTs, the AI assistants, the Reddits of the world, and other platforms where people use to search. And so our challenge is to stay at the forefront of this.
And you also, at a personal level, had a tremendous career where you've had many roles. Can you develop a little bit upon that?
Sure. So I started off, as I mentioned, as an account director, then took the lead of the DAC Montreal office as a general manager. A few years later, I was promoted to president of the 3 Canadian offices of DAC. So very much a general management role. And that was for about 20 years. And almost 5 years ago, I stepped into the head of growth at DAC, but for North America. So both US, which is a lion's share of the business, and Canada, in servicing our 7 North American offices. So it's been definitely a long time at DAC, but it's never been the agency has changed so much over time. and my role has changed as well. So people say, "My God, I can't believe you've been there 30 years," but it doesn't feel like I've been with the same company for 30 years, other than many of the people I've worked with for that time period or long time.
And honestly, this is one thing, because I've been somehow, we could say it, a competitor back in the days in my
Yeah,
past life
yeah,
before starting
yeah,
Polysleep.
yeah.
I saw so many agencies, I saw so many clients. One thing that strikes me and I love to see about DAC is your capacity to reinvent yourselves internally with the people. And I wonder, because you've been also in a position where you had to call the direction, you had to call the shots, what were the pros of being in these shoes, and how did you ensure to have the right people along you as you go through this journey?
Um, so obviously seeing the change, and we have an incredible CEO, Norm Haggerty, who's been completely fearless in facing those challenges. So Norm, myself, the executive team, I've always faced the challenges head on and looked at challenging the agency in what we're doing all the time. And as a result, we've never taken anything for granted. In fact, I will go as far as saying that I'm not aware of any other company, and I know I sound biased and going to blow our own horn here, but that have come out of the directory business, been able to reinvent itself and grow with the amount of scale and growth that we've seen at DAC, literally like changing your engine while in flight. And I think that stems from we have a saying at DAC, only the paranoid survive. We are paranoid for sure. For example, a couple of years ago, when ChatGPT came out, we literally asked everyone in the organization to get on it, find a specific application for their own role so that we could find efficiencies. And very soon after, we're one of the first agencies to commit to an OpenAI enterprise level partnership. And today, AI is completely reinventing the agency. I just came out of a meeting this morning, which blew my mind in terms of our Iris operating system and the efficiencies that we're gaining that we can pass on to clients leveraging AI. And all that to say that we don't take things for granted. We embrace change. And then you are entrepreneurs, and then you will fail. We've had a few of those. But if you have a vision and you don't accept failure, then you will succeed. And that is having that faith is extremely important as an entrepreneur.
And I love this analogy that resilience is what will separate company that succeed from the one who won't. And I agree with you. And I'll go over and above. It's not about DAC being one of the only company I've known throughout my career that were able to transition from the directory to the digital world and the agency world. But also I've seen a larger company with more resources failing as well. So it's not even about money, like you said.
Yeah.
I think it's about culture. I think it's about resilience. And now, like you said, we live in a world where data becomes the most important source of information we can have, and the most precious one. AI is making a lot of noise. And looking forward, I think you also are working to build up something that you guys call Prove Intelligence. So could you please elaborate a bit about that?
Correct. So we're data nerds. I mean, as you mentioned, data is among the most valuable currency that we have. A lot of clients are just, they're swimming in data, but they're starving for information. They don't really apply the best of it. So a few years ago, we had data scientists, but we established a practice called Prove Intelligence that underpins everything we do at DAC. Essentially, Prove does the correlation of data points for the purpose of better reporting or forecasting outcomes. And with that, it helps all the pillars in the agency. And for certain brands, we're strictly their data science partner as Prove Intelligence. And we named it Prove because sometimes we might work with the competing media agency, and Prove is on its own as a data science business that could correlate this. But essentially, our goal is to find insights into the data. As one of our colleagues would say, is actually, if we can answer questions you've not even thought of asking, we've done a pretty good job. And I've seen time and time over again, correlations of data points saying, it's interesting when these three things happen, we have this outcome. And we like this outcome. So let's do more of these three things. And let's shift from here to here. And that's exactly what Iris is going to do for us. It's doing currently is finding opportunities in buckets and clusters of information, and then be able to unveil that. What AI is able to do, of course, is accelerate those insights. What used to take a week to do is now done in a matter of minutes, and then we can really crunch a lot more data. So Prove is our backbone. It underpins everything we do, and it comes with all engagements as DAC. So when you hire us to run your media, even for, say, search engine optimization or content strategies, or even insights, we will use the data scientists and the tool that we have through Prove Intelligence to help our brands.
I love that. So that's one component that I think is critical when you work with an agency, to make sure you have a partner that have the right solution. What I love is most of the solution you have has been developed in-house based on real problem, and not just third-party solution that you resell for whatsoever reason, can be valuable or not. Another component that I want to touch upon, because you've went from an executive role, and to the eyes of some people, they would ask themselves, but why would you go back to sell? And that's one thing I love about your role, you as a person and DAC in general, is your approach to new customer or existing customers and your attention to understanding their problem. I would love you to expand upon that, to really explain how do you feel about that and what makes it so different.
Well, I would say that, whether we like it or not, sometimes sales has a bad word, but we're all selling. We start selling as kids, negotiating with your parents, and then start your career. So even my prior role, obviously there was a lot of business development, which is the backbone of the business. For any business, obviously you need to acquire new customers in addition to keeping and growing your existing customers. So what I love about the business development, I found that I have a certain skill to be able to connect with people. I think the first step is having the permission to connect, having a layer of a relationship, especially these days with so much technology spamming the brands, to the point where I think email has become fairly ineffective when it's unaddressed and volume based. So what you want to do is being able to connect, but really, really try to understand what's the different, what difference could you make? Like if you were sitting with that same person a year later and they've engaged with you and you've been successful, what exactly does that look like? And then having the belief that you can do it. So turning around and talking to our teams and say, can we actually do this? Can we move the needle to this level? Because if we can, then there's no point in, wasting anyone's time. Let's just be frank with ourselves. And that's how we approach it. We approach it in a very genuine way. And I've done this all my life. Like it doesn't matter whether the role is 100% biz dev or partly biz dev. When you're leading an account that you're trying to grow, or you're leading a whole operation, what you want to do is understand what definition of success is, and then move the needle towards that, and having the confidence and the abilities to know that you're going to deliver ultimately. And the other thing I will say is a lot of it also comes down to your personal brand. That reputation you build, like if we couldn't fulfill the promise, I couldn't do this role, especially that, I don't oversee the teams directly. So having the ability to, and the confidence to know that the promise is getting fulfilled is critically important. And if it isn't, then understand why, be honest about it, and deal with it.
Yeah, and I think that's the right approach. Which brings me to my next question, because you started as a Canadian entity, but now you have business everywhere, Europe, United States. How did you manage that? And how do you manage to enforce and ensure that consistency in your vision, your mission, your approach?
Um, oh, so that's an interesting question. So first of all, how we achieved it was a combination of organic growth. So some offices we opened. Some of our European offices were complete startups like Paris and Spain. Some were acquisitions, but smaller acquisitions like London office, which was our hub of European operation, was an acquisition from an agency called Make It Rain.
Mhm.
And then some of our US offices were acquisitions and or a blend of startups as well. So I think the key to success, first of all, we have a very entrepreneurial spirit at DAC. So our general managers have their own, business P&L they look at, although there's a common P&L for the business as well. But at the core, we try to find people that share the common values. So the onboarding and interviewing process at DAC is a bit intensive, especially at the executive level. It can involve 8, 10 meetings. And that's to ensure we have alignment of values. We're not saying that we have the right values, but we are trying to find people that share those. And once you have that as a base, the rest kind of falls in place. Because what seems right to you will seem right to the other person in this market, because we've talked about it. We do personality tests. We try to talk about it. So we try to hire people that share those common values. And to us, I mean, we have a number of saying at DSC, we talk about our E square, C squares. So enthusiasm, execution, curiosity, courage are attributes of folks at DAC. And I won't expand too much on that, but we talked about what that means. Now, it doesn't mean everyone's enthusiastic the same way. I'm French Canadian, so my enthusiasm is Latin and will be very different than some of my colleagues in Toronto.
Yeah.
But, attributes such as courage and curiosity are extremely important. And then with that, we talked about our 3 Ps, which are people, performance, and partnering, which are the pillars within the agency. So we talk about those things, and we try to find folks that relate to those attributes. And I think once you have that and you hire, probably one of the critical, and I'm not saying anything novel here, critical key to an entrepreneurial success will be to surround yourself with the right people and even brighter and smarter people than you are. And if you do that, but I think that value set is extremely important. So don't compromise that. You might have the best salesperson in the world, but the way that person, so it's the what, but the way that person is going to achieve success might be in a bulldozing way and might offend or might misrepresent. For us, it's a deal breaker. Like we would never, I'd compromise performance. Like I would hire somebody that maybe not perform same level, but long-term, they will perform better. And we're going to avoid all this friction. So I think the way to keep the consistency is having consistency of values of people. Just to close on that question. And if you look within our management team, one of the things Norm has done particularly well is surround himself. Like I'm blessed to work with extraordinary team. I think we got the best team in the business, but of course I'm totally biased. But also look at the tenure. It's very low turnover, almost zero turnover at the executive team.
Yep.
People have been dead 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years. And there's a reason for that, right? So we all have a choice. We all have a choice every time we come into the office, whether this is where I want to be. And why is that? It's because, pretty well you're in sync with the company values. You're not questioning some fundamental pillars of your beliefs. And I think that's one of the keys to succeed. If you don't have that, you're going to have some friction, and the time you spend there may not be as productive as the time you would spend aligning the business and aligning the stakeholders.
Agreed. And I think DAC, one of the advantage you have compared to any agency is you've been through probably one of the hardest pivot and change a company can have to go through, because you were relying on a single media to generate 100% of your revenue, and you've pivoted to multimedia in an ever-changing world. And you're probably better equipped because you've done it, and you've done it successfully, which is quite rare, to do it with what is coming up next, which is this AI transformation. And I want to touch a bit upon that. You're in it, we're in it. whether you like it or not, if you plan to start an enterprise or a business or a venture or anything, AI is going to be somehow part of it. What are the top trends or things you see that any entrepreneur should care about and be careful maybe about as well?
Well, obviously there's emerging platforms. It's almost impossible to stay on top of them. But I would think that the one thing I would recommend any entrepreneur to do is to try it, to get in it, to use it, to talk to it as if you're talking to your assistant, to teach it, to train it. And whether it's Claude or ChatGPT, I don't think it matters particularly on one platform. There's some better than others, don't get me wrong. And there's some versions as you get more advanced. But I think the key here is to be curious, understand what it can do, find people that understand the space. We have a whole team dedicated to AI at DAC. Some folks within the agency raise their hands because they're personally consumed by it. They're curious about it. They're reading about it. They are bringing solutions. The stuff that's coming back is unbelievable. Blows my mind. So I'm a light user, I will admit, but I could see how some of our own guardrail is the technology we've built at DAC as among other things, a prompt engine that interacts with OpenAI. And so we use that to help us as almost an assistant. So whereby I was before maybe just conducting a Google search, I will go to Guardrail, I'll go to Chat, which is connected to ChatGPT, and ask the question. And if I'm not quite pleased with the answer, then I'll ask a second question, and then I'll ask a third question, and I'll start training and say, I don't want to hear about that. I really want more about this. Or you're off over here. Can you look again deeper, and especially around, so we use it, for example, for prospecting around these brands and their competitive set. What are the biggest challenges they have? And then how do you see the forecast is going to be? It's amazing what's coming back. And the more you interact with it, the better you get. So my piece of advice is get in there. Try it. And I think it's impossible to completely stay on top of the space, but understand what it can do for you. Get support from people that really can leverage it. And so the folks at Prove and the folks at VAC, that's exactly what we're doing currently.
A question I would like to ask you, Mario, because you're probably one of the most dedicated, resilient, and hardworking person I know. How did you build that resilience over time? And how important it is for any entrepreneur or someone thinking it's going to be an easy path? I would rather tell them a cautionary tale. It's a lot of work. How did you build that resilience? How do you continue after so many years to be as disciplined as you are?
I think what fuels it are the rewards. I think, one thing that particularly important to me is to understand and feel that I'm making a contribution. And regardless of the challenge, having the faith and support to face it. So you do need to believe in your own abilities. You do need to have faith that it is possible to whatever challenge you have. And the more challenges you face and overcome, I think the more resilient you become. To me, I don't think I'm extraordinary, frankly. I think everyone's going through their share of challenges. But I will face the challenges. Another saying is, failure is not an option. So what are you going to do to succeed? Right? Where are you going to do to succeed? If you don't think you can achieve it, I think it's likely you'll miss. Even though the challenge may be high, let's put our best foot forward, right? No, it's got to be a realistic objective. So I think you achieve resilience through experience, obviously, the accumulation of successes. So the more success you have, the more confident you become, probably the more resilient. Oh, I've seen this before. And I can see it like one of the big rewards at this time in my career is to be able to mentor and coach. And I see it with certain folks that are starting off in their career, and I said, no, we've seen worse than this. Listen, we can do this. Okay, so don't get discouraged here. We might not get it the first time, but we're gonna pull it off. Okay, and just we're not brain surgeons. This is not the end of the world. If we fail, we're just gonna pick it up and get moving. Continue, just continue. Like, we're all gonna eat tonight. Like, we're really in a privileged state, especially in Canada. Like, people we're interacting with, we're all privileged. So we got to put things in perspective and just move on.
I love this. You're right. Nobody's bleeding at the end of the day. We're not surgeons. And you have a lot of experience. You've been through a lot of situation. Is there still something that keeps you up at night? Something that is a source of stress and you're like, oh.
Yeah, I was expecting this question, actually, given the podcast title. Yes. Yes, for sure. Without getting deep into it, obviously the current macroeconomic environment is of concern, right? So I think we've been enjoying decades of peace, and I think we're entering a new world, and it's moving fast. And so, yes, that does concern me, although I believe things will work out in the end, because reasonable people will get to reasonable solutions. So that's certainly these days one of the things that keeps me up. Usually don't have any problem falling asleep, but if I wake up, then the hamster will start spinning. Which, by the way, I'll talk to you about this, but there's ways to deal with this, which is a thing I've really worked on in the last decade, just calm myself down. And then, of course, the achievement of objectives is always something that's on my mind, right? So we set bars, we like to move ahead. So I do worry about this all the time. I used to say I worry for a living. Again, going back to my saying of, paranoid survive, only the paranoid survive. Yes, there's a few things that keep me up at night. It could be personal, the kids, it could be, anything that's happening. I think at the end of the day is just how you deal with it. So I try not to stay up at night. And I think I'm pretty successful in calming myself down through cognition, meditation, relaxation. When it happens, putting things in perspective, I had a professional coach once giving me one of the top advices that I've had, which is when something becomes overbearing and just so much in your mind, then just make a deal with yourself and park it for 24 or 48 hours. And when it resurfaces, just say, no, it's in, no, I'm going to think about it Monday morning. And it works. It works because on the Monday morning, all of a sudden it's a lot clearer. You're not spinning, whether you like it or not. I don't know. There's been some work that's happened in your brain that just you've taken a perspective, and then you can revisit this issue, and it's a lot clearer most of the time. So it's a tip that was given to me, and maybe I could give it to your audience. Or it works for me for sure.
I think it's a great advice because often we are in such a fast-paced environment that we forget to give ourselves time.
Exactly.
It's a great advice.
Yeah.
It's a great advice. Mario, thank you so much for that time you spent with me and the audience. If people are interested about you or DAC, what is the best way to reach you? Where can they find more information about DAC and you?
So dacgroup.com on the company website, invite you to visit us, and then LinkedIn for sure. So there's another Mario Lemieux. I have to say that I was born a few months before. I'm the original guy, but I do not play hockey. So it's Mario at DAC on LinkedIn. But yeah, you could use messaging there. And then thank you so much for having me on your show. I hope if one of these advisors can help anyone, that would be great.
I'm sure they will. And again, thank you so much for your time today, Mario. It's greatly appreciated. Have an amazing one.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you so much for being part of the Up at Night family. If you've liked what you heard today, don't forget to rate, follow, subscribe, or leave me a comment below. New episodes of Up at Night drop every week. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single episode. I'm Jeremiah Curvers. Until next time.